And here we go.
Welcome to the SDSU Studio Series. In the midst of what is happening in the world today, we've created a series of digital conversations with Broadway professionals, where we talk about the craft and the business of Broadway and how we can pass along this legacy to the next generation of musical theater artists. The SDSU Studio Series is organized by the SDSU MFA Musical Theatre Program. This program is one of only a handful of graduate degrees offered in the United States that offer the terminal degree in musical theater, and our graduates are acting, directing, choreographing, music directing, writing, and teaching in university positions worldwide. Our goal is to bring the professional world and the academic world together so that students of musical theater are prepared for today's job market. My name is Robert Meff. I worked as a professional conductor, music director, and orchestrator on Broadway for 22 years before moving to San Diego to become the head of the MFA Musical Theatre Program. My goal is that every person who wants to be a musical theater artist is able to access what is going on in the professional world, which led me to creating this series and leads me to my guest, David Perlow. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Before we begin, I want to give some expectations of today's discussion. If you have questions, feel free to use the chat function built into Zoom. After my questions are completed, I will ask questions from your submissions. And hey, if you're from a university musical theater program, type the name of your school in the chat function. I would love to see who is represented. So let's begin. David Perlow is a graduate of the NYU Tisch Drama School. He began his career as an actor, making his Broadway debut in the Tony-winning 2010 revival of La Cage aux Folles, before appearing in over 1,000 performances as the role of Fiyero in Wicked. As a director, he's been on the teams of 5 Broadway productions, most recently serving as associate director of the Tony-winning revival Once on This Island. As a teacher, he has worked with the drama departments at NYU Tisch, UT Austin, and many other universities across the country. We're so happy to have you here, David. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. It's so weird to hear all that in one go. I was like, wow.
Yeah, you did all that stuff.
That sounds fun. I wish I remembered more of it. That sounds like so much fun.
Well, it's the reason they call it a play, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, we have a series of questions for you, but I wanted to start with, as an artist, how have you been affected by COVID-19? And how are you coping personally? And how is New York City theater coping?
Well, to address the first question, personally, we're all now, I think, moving into really mental health maintenance mode, you know, especially people who have not been, who are not students at a university, for instance, and have had a structured schedule. You know, when this happened on March 12th or 13th, freelancers, certainly your schedule just went out the window and the structure kind of went out the window. And I'm the artistic director of a theater company called Tag Theater Company, which I formed with actors from my acting studio in New York called the Actors Gym. And so I have kept us going on Zoom. We've done 19 readings of plays in the past 6 weeks. We've been on Zoom. I think we've had like 90 hours of time together on Zoom. And I set such an aggressive schedule because it was really important to me to keep sharp and to make sure that this didn't shake our central inclination to keep moving and keep our craft as sharp as possible and to keep connecting with one another. The mission of the company is really to move people closer to one another rather than pushing people away from one another with the work we put on stage. And so it was very important to me to keep things moving. And, you know, you spend a lot of time, as we all have been, on Zoom, and there's a little bit of like Zoom burnout that can sneak in. So we're managing that. And really just being as patient as possible with myself and all the people I work with, and kind, making sure that, you know, when this all happened, I go month to month in monthly sessions at my studio, and there were people, I was effectively holding a lot of money in deposits and enrollment fees from people, and just making sure that without hesitation, you know, you just send it back. You do the right thing and you send it back. And There have been organizations who I've seen doing the right thing and who have kind of balked at doing the right thing. And so it's been really important to me to stay compassionate and kind and patient, personally and professionally. That's really the answer. And to keep I'm a leader in my creative community. And so it's the studio that we study at, Shetler Studios. I don't know if any of you know it or have heard it, just shut down today permanently, which is a gigantic blow to the New York City theater community. So I sent an email out to my company reassuring them that everything's going to be okay, and just day-to-day maintenance of morale and making sure that people have things to do. But it's been weird. It's been weird.
Are you in New York City?
No, we left New York City, and Allie, my partner, had a family friend with a house that was sitting empty in Massachusetts. So we ended up in Massachusetts.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's been nice, a little space.
Well, that's good. Well, yeah. I wanted to tell you that many of our students turning in today are currently studying musical theater. There are several educators out there. But I wondered how you found theater in the first place. Was your path to the arts a linear one? Did you always want to do theater? What was it like when you were young?
When I was young, I was a baseball player. So I didn't actually sing a note till I was about 14, freshman in high school. And even then, I started taking voice lessons because my chorus teacher, Mrs. Warren, who was an opera singer in her day and has a beautiful voice and was a great teacher, heard me in the back of chorus class goofing around or something and thought that I had a decent voice. So she asked me to come and audition for the musical, which was Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. And I got the wine steward in Cinderella. And that was my first time on stage. And I rather liked it because everyone seemed to be clapping and that was nice. And I liked being in front of people. And, but I was not one of these kids who was, and I'm sure there's a lot of people watching right now who were in dance class when they were 5 years old or in voice lessons. I was not a theater kid. I got into it. I didn't give up playing baseball to do theater in high school full-time and do the musical full-time until I was a junior in high school. So it was a bit late. But I followed a buddy of mine who had just gotten into Tisch 2 years ahead of me. And I looked up to him so much that I said, well, if he's going to go there, I'd like to go there. And so that's what I did.
That's amazing. What, if any, connection do you have? What did you learn from doing baseball that helps you in your career now?
Oh, man. Well, my studio is called the Actors Gym.
Okay.
So it's, in my directing style, my coaching style it's kind of athletic. I think the theater community in general could benefit from sometimes a bit more of a mindset that we could steal from athletic practices, the discipline of being there on time. There's something sort of martial about it, but the way that you see track teams running laps, doing reps in the weight room. There's a beautiful sense of freedom and play in the arts, which is why we're all in the arts. But what I did take from my time as an athlete is a sense of discipline and precision of practice, and permission to engage, to give the artist the respect of engaging them straightforwardly about something I think that they could be doing better, and holding my artists accountable to themselves. One of my big things is I'm going to hold you accountable to your own potential. And sometimes I do that, like a basketball coach will. I'll say, you need to be better than this. And it would never constrict the artist, but it would be to say, I know you, I know what you can do. You need to work harder, and you will grow. And I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm not going to lead you into the woods and then leave you there by yourself. But I need you to work harder, and I'll stick with you all the way through if you'll stick with me.
It's really fascinating, actually, and I want to extend that a little bit. So, you showed up for the first day of rehearsal for La Cage aux Folles. That was your big first Broadway show.
Yeah,
and you already had a certain work ethic built into you from your baseball era, probably from your NYU training too.
Yeah.
Did you feel prepared for that moment? How did you feel prepared? And then maybe how did you feel unprepared for that moment?
Gosh, My first rehearsal for La Cage. I was 24. So how, you know, 20, how prepared can you be? 24. But I
You
felt,
think you are.
you think you are. Well, isn't that half the battle? You know, it's like I feel prepared. No, to be honest with you, when I was that age, I was very confident. I could say cocky. You know, I tried not to be rude or arrogant, but I really believed in myself, and I worked really hard, and I tried to stay in as good a shape as I possibly could. And so I had, because of my upbringing, my father was an athlete. I had that athletic mindset, that competitive kind of mindset of, I'm not scared of anyone. I wasn't scared of anyone in this room, which is the classic, youthful ignorance thing. There was plenty to be scared of, but I just wasn't. And so I certainly wouldn't say that I felt unprepared, but I remember the meet and greet. I'll never forget the meet and greet. I was, again, a kid. I had done a show, I'd worked at La Jolla and I had worked at North Shore, and I'd done some cool regional stuff. I did a show in New Orleans called White Noise that was really, really cool. So I'd done plenty of stuff, but at this meet and greet, and meet and greets. It's like, let me hold the muffin and pretend to eat it and like in the corner. It's just awful, the meet and greet thing. Like, I'm so afraid. It's so anxiety. But we're at this meet and greet, and Kelsey Grammer was in the room. He was playing George, and Doug Hodge was there, and Harvey Firestein was there, who became a close friend and a mentor of mine. But I didn't know anyone yet. So my plan was I was going to walk up to Doug Hodge and try and strike up a conversation about something. And I walked up to him and I said, first read through today, that's pretty exciting. And he took a bite out of his donut and he looked at me and he said, I fucking hate read throughs. And he walked away. I was like, idiot. So socially, it was intimidating, because you're working now at a level with people with a supreme amount of experience and who know a lot more than you do. But there's nothing like being 24 and the confidence that can sometimes come with that. And I was fortunate enough to feel confident.
Oh, absolutely. Well, all of us know everything when we're 24.
Everything.
Yes.
Everything.
It takes about 10 more years to realize how little you know.
I'm 30. I'm about to turn 35. I'm back around to knowing nothing.
Yep.
And that's how it goes. That's how it goes.
And listen, I'm 51 and I know less than I did when I was 30. So
yes. And when we're 70, we'll know less than we did at 50. And that's like healthy. That's good. That means it's going well.
Well, I think the truth to that is that you realize how much there is to know, and hopefully develop a passion for learning it. Yeah,
to be in the room with Doug Hodge there's one thing I'll never ever forget that he did. He was very, very British in his process. Terry Johnson was the director. It was a Many-Year Chocolate Factory production, so it was a British creative team, British producers. And the Brits and the Americans do things a little bit differently in rehearsal. Just some of the rhythms of rehearsal are a little bit different. And this is going to be one of my answers to the actor's studio questions at the end. But people were shushing in the rehearsal room. Assistant stage manager would shush. And finally, Doug turned around. He was in the middle of a scene with Kelsey or doing something, I don't remember. And he turned around and he really was pissed. And he said, if one more person shushes, I swear I'm walking out of the room and we're taking a week off. Or something. It's a creative space. How are we supposed to work with all this shushing? And I've never shushed ever since that. Not because it was frightening, but because, oh, of course. Like, what does that do? It just shuts someone. It's meant to startle someone into being silent. And he really was masterful at engineering a rehearsal space that was as free as it could possibly be, because I think he knew he needed it to play Alban. He knew Kelsey needed it. He knew that it was a tough show for both of them, and he was really, really skilled and experienced at cultivating a rehearsal room and galvanizing the group to a common mission, which is sometimes something that the the lead actor can do better than the director, depending on the director's style, you know.
Yeah.
But he was great at that.
Well, I want to go back a little bit and connect a couple of dots here. So you mentioned people that were influential, like Doug Hodge and Harvey Fierstein, and the fellow that went to NYU before you, and your high school choir director. So of these people, some of them perhaps you might consider them mentors. So what makes a good mentor, and what about them? What about them caused you to listen, basically?
Well, I was really fortunate in that they were never my teachers. You know, Joe Mantello is who I really hold as my mentor. If I said that to him, it would be the first time he'd be hearing it. I'm sure he would not be surprised I feel that way. But what my job was to be his associate director. That's what I had a job to do. And the reality was, and the attitude was, if I happened to learn anything, which of course in the rooms that I was in, I was going to, if I was paying half attention, but I was not there to learn. I was there to do a job. And I think Joe did a magnificent job as a mentor, unwitting or not, in leaving me alone to figure things out for myself. And there were a couple of times that I had an idea. He was always welcoming with ideas. He's most definitely the leader in the room. There are some directors who take ideas from everybody in the room. He's not like that. His vision is clear. But, you know, I would sit next to him. You know, the associate or assistant director's job is basically, depending on the director, with Joe, it was to sit there all day. And if he needed something, to help him out with it. If you have an idea, he's more than willing to hear it. And a couple of times I had a staging idea or a little idea, and he put it into the production. And a moment like that, I was 27, I think, 26 or 27 when I first worked with him. And wow, you know, he didn't then take me aside and say, "Way to go, buddy. There was none of that." He just looked at me, he heard the idea, he looked up there and he said, "Okay." And he went about his business at rehearsal. And I went back to my business of trying to keep my eyes open for the next 4 hours, you know. And the stamina I was able to build, I can now, because of my time with Joe, and I was not able to do this before my time with Joe, I can sit in a rehearsal that I am usually at this point in my career, I'm leading them because I'm either directing or at the studio. And, you know, the rehearsal can be 4, 6, 8 hours long. And I just my focus doesn't flag. And it did. I mean, it's really, really difficult, you know, when you're coming up to stay focused, when you're not necessarily the guy doing everything in the room. And he taught me how to focus. Just being in the presence of someone like that, you know, you're not going to be late, not going to be showing up late. You're not going to be showing up hungover. You're not going to be you're going to be dressed nicely, you're going to show up to work, and you're going to pay attention. And what the most important, and I really want everyone to hear this is super important. I learned that when you are spending time with someone in a professional situation who you admire or look up to, and how could you not if you're associate director for Joe, my God, this is great. It took me a second to learn, because I asked him, like, "Hey, do you want to get a drink or something sometime, or like get lunch?" And he was always gracious as can be, but no, was the answer. And it took me a second to learn, oh, you can have a very intimate professional relationship with someone without it having to tip over into a personal relationship. A personal relationship is not the only relationship to be held, to be valued. You know, I felt when I was a kid that, man, I'm spending every day with this guy, but if I could just get a drink with him and pick his, you know, the things we think when we're young. And I really want to encourage everyone to understand that a personal relationship like that is distinct and not necessary to cultivate a really strong and lasting professional relationship. And Joe and I have to this day never gotten a drink with each other, but I've been associate for him on 5 shows on Broadway. and it's just not, those relationships are distinct. And I just remember being young and being a little eager to be a pal. And the relationship is actually much stronger sometimes without that element. So that was a huge lesson from Joe.
I think that's super valuable, and not something that's, something that you would know right away. I want to dig a little deeper into that. So I sort of asked you about what makes a good mentor, but a lot of people here are, in college right now, and they're looking for mentorship. So there's another key to that equation, which is you have to be open to listening. So
Yeah.
what can you talk about that for a little bit? Like what made you open to listening and being mentored?
As a mentee?
Correct.
Well, again, the dynamic of the relationship was, from my perspective, maybe mentor-mentee, but when you're with someone who you respect, and Joe is just a marvelously gifted director, you certainly wouldn't have to twist my arm to watch and listen to what he had to say. To answer your question better, let's go from someone who is a little bit more challenging to listen to than Joe. Joe is not challenging to listen to. If you have someone, and I have someone who is very close in my life who was very challenging, but I knew he could help me. I knew he knew more than I knew. And out of respect for him, because he was older than I was, and because of his career, I shut up and I bit my tongue and I listened. And you do that out of respect is the answer, really. Professional respect, and to understand that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And if I remember when I was younger thinking, I would sit in rooms with these people and say, God, I wish I was doing more. I wish I was doing more. And looking back, you're doing a lot by sitting there and showing the people the respect of listening. And there were a couple times where I overstepped. There was a meeting once with the artistic directors of Manhattan Theater Club, Lynn Meadow, and Harvey Fierstein was there, and Joe. It was a meeting about Casa Valentina, and I gave an opinion that was unsolicited and unwelcome. And Harvey took me aside and he said, and it was a great, really, really powerful lesson. He said, listen, honey, no one gives a shit what you think. You're very nice, and I want you to do well. I really do. Please keep your mouth shut. And and of course, at the time, I don't know, I was probably freaked out, or I don't know how I felt, but being spoken, but now now basically what I do is I'm a mentor. I'm a creative mentor and a creative leader, and I mentor professionals. And I have taken people aside who have been my assistant directors, and I haven't said it quite like Harvey would say it in his inimitable way. But I have said, when I'm speaking to a designer about a wardrobe or something, you gotta let me use my mind. Sometimes I might stop talking for a second. If I got everyone jumping in, it's going to be very difficult for me. So just to help people understand when to speak up and when not to speak up. But also, Harvey would say the same thing. When he was young, he wasn't listening to anyone tell him to shut up. And when I was young, I wasn't particularly listening to anyone telling me to shut up. So you do have to strike a balance in being respectful and also being your own person. And if you have an idea, you put it out into the world. You can't let people, there's a time to and a time not to, but you can't let people persuade you not to put your ideas out into the world.
That's true. Well, it leads me to a related subject for this. So a lot of your early career was about, getting feedback from people. As an actor, you're, on stage, whether it's Joe or whoever it is, getting feedback, right? And you transition your career into now you're giving feedback to people. So I guess my question is, what makes good feedback? Like when you're receiving feedback, how do you tell the difference between what is useful and what is not? And then when you're giving feedback, how do you make sure that people hear it?
Such a good question. Feedback. I have a whole spiel I give on feedback at the studio. It's really, really, really important. because actors are asking for it left, right, and center, from casting directors, from talent agents, feedback, feedback, feedback. From the recipient's point of view, I really think it's as simple as, does this feedback serve to enhance you? Does it make you feel more powerful, or does it make you feel diminished and more self-conscious? If it makes you feel diminished and more self-conscious, the content of the feedback is no longer relevant. It's bad feedback. No note from a director, no feedback from anyone. If it's valuable, again, not in content, but if a person is not receptive, it doesn't matter what you're saying. We all know that. We have to keep people receptive. And that's all directing is, to a great extent, is keeping the people you're working with receptive, because it's like that easy to shut an actor down. You say something that frightens them or that makes them feel self-conscious, and you can lose an actor for a week of rehearsal before they trust you enough to come back and listen to what you have to say. But what I think about feedback, and this speaks to, I think, a fundamental misunderstanding of a division of labor that I'll talk about for a second. There's a lot of classes in New York that rely upon the feedback of a casting director, an associate casting director. I just want to be clear, as someone who has cast shows at Telsey and just been casting now for a while, what the role of the casting director is to act as a liaison between the creative team of whatever show that they've been contracted to help cast and the talent agent. So the casting director calls, they read the script, they talk to the creative team, they say, okay, let me get a feel for your show. Okay, I think I have some people who you will be not displeased to have in the room. I don't want to waste the creative team's time. I want to call the people into the room who are the appropriate actors to be in the room. They then call talent agents, and that's how appointments happen. They say, I think this person would be good for this show. Craig Burns, who's a casting director at Telsey, who's a great guy and a friend of mine. He was the casting director on Once on This Island. So a lot of people don't realize Craig and anyone in Craig's position who's doing their job properly never did and would never personally weigh in on an actor's ability to the creative team, ever. That's not their job. He brings someone in, he stands behind the table with his arms behind his back, he waits for the audition to be over, he looks at the creative team and he says, are you all good? He says, okay, great, thank you. And then he goes out and gets the next person. In the meeting, the post-mortem meetings that happen after these sessions, he is off to the side. He'll give his opinion if it's solicited. Usually, if you're soliciting a casting director's opinion, it has to do with a person's reputation. Is this person really difficult to work with? Or are they, because we've seen what they can do creatively, we now want to know, is it a good idea to have them in the room? But in no part of their job does a casting director develop a vocabulary to talk to actors about acting in a way that will enhance their ability to do what they do creatively. That is not a vocabulary that a casting agent or a casting director has. If they've picked up some things over the years, they've picked up some things over the years. But so that's a casting director. They're a liaison. They put the right actors in the right rooms. A talent agent is basically like an attorney. They get their actors the best money that they can. They negotiate contracts with the general managers of the shows. Again, a position that dedicates 0 hours of the day to developing a vocabulary to help actors act better. So that's not to say that they don't have opinions, but to ask the typical talent agent for feedback would be the same as asking a subscription audience member at Manhattan Theater Club for professional feedback. It's someone who watches theater a lot, who talks to general managers about theater a lot, but never, ever, as a part of their professional path, develops a vocabulary to help actors do their job in a clearer way. So what I have to say about feedback is you should only accept feedback, and please only request feedback from a very close, trusted group of creative colleagues. Now, that doesn't just mean only ask your roommate and that's it. It means you have to build a community of people who you trust and who you know what they're talking about. That's another thing. We ask these casting agents for feedback and we take what they say as gospel. They may have no idea what they're talking about. They may have no idea how to talk to actors about how to improve. There's nothing in their job description that would suggest that they do. So you want feedback from someone who knows, who dedicates a significant part of their life to talking to actors about what they do and can talk to them about it, not only in a way that may be true or not, but in a way that does not make the actor more self-conscious than they were when they started the conversation. And I can't think of a time when an actor has come to me saying they got feedback from a casting agent or from a talent agent that made them feel enhanced or better. And it's not because they can't take criticism, it's because it was wrong. It didn't make them feel empowered. So a lot of what I do as a mentor is no matter what I'm doing, if I'm kind of going in on someone and holding them accountable for what they're doing and for achieving their own potential, or if I'm just directing someone in a play that I'm staging with my company, my primary objective at all times is to leave the person feeling empowered and confident, because professionally, you're not going to get the best work out of them if they're not feeling really confident and empowered. And second of all, actors take so many hits that they can't avoid anyway, that it would be a gross misunderstanding of the director or the mentor's position to make anyone not feel good ever. For the sake of, I'm not saying you handle people with kid gloves, but if you're going to take someone to church on something, you have to really put yourself on the line too and say, you cannot work with me if you do not step up in this way. And you tell me if I need to show up 2 hours early every day to help you do that. There has to be that second part. So the person feels like they're indispensable, which is important for actors to feel.
This is so really very interesting. And you have a unique point of view because you've come from three different sides here. Like you've come from it from the stage point of view as an actor. You come from it from an associate director, one who's in the room listening, and also as a director yourself, the person making the decisions about things. So I'm going to ask you a two-part question, and the first is going to be about Joe, since you've worked with him so much, and about his process. And then I'm going to pivot to what about your process is. And since we're talking about auditions, I'd like to ask what is Joe's process for auditions, and what does he expect an actor? What level of preparation does he expect? Like, because many of our listeners will probably audition for Wicked, right? Because they're the right age for the show.
There's an army of us.
There's an army, yes, right. It was like when I was around, everyone auditioned for Les Mis, right?
Yeah.
So what is expected and what is successful? Like what is the people who succeed, the people who get cast, is there something in common that they have?
Yeah, they work hard. They work hard.
And how do they show that in an audition?
Well, before we get to the answers like preparation and knowing your lines and things, I'll give you the answer that I give to students who are new, actors who come to my studio who are new to the studio. Sometimes ask, do we have to, I'm really having trouble memorizing. Do you have any advice for how to memorize?
Okay.
And I'm never quite, I might not be the best person to ask, first of all, because memorizing was never an issue. I had a lot of other issues, but I could memorize quickly. So I don't know really the answer to the question. However, what I do make sure to ask is, or to say, is if you were a lawyer, you would be up at 6 o'clock in the morning. You'd be at your desk by 7:45. You would work on one case until at least 7:45 that night. And you might work on that case at that desk for 9 months before it came to trial. How long, actor who I'm talking to, have you sat at a desk with this material, with your phone off, dedicating your attention to memorizing this material? And that usually is the end of the conversation. Because because, and I did it myself. You sit there, it's difficult. You sit there for 45 minutes and you work half a page, and then you go off and do something else, or maybe an hour, or maybe 2 hours. But I say to actors, pretend that like this is your actual job, which is not pretend, it is your actual job. And when you get a material to memorize, this question of do we have to be memorized? Guys, I mean, yes, you do have to be memorized. Is it also a good idea to hold paper in an audition? Yeah, it is a good idea to hold the paper in an audition, because it signals that this is not a polished, complete performance. It gives you something to do with one of your hands. And the optics are of a process in development, and that's really important. But just think about what it means to be successful in any field, in any country on the planet. Are you preparing as hard as possible, or are you not preparing as hard as possible because someone said, no, you don't really have to? You can't, in my studio, you cannot work unless you are off book for the first day for the entire scene. There's just no, you can't act unless if you're putting any conscious attention on word retrieval, you do not have the bandwidth to do what it is that you need to do, and to keep your attention outwardly directed, to have an impact on your target, to move the play forward, to think about what you're saying, to use the words to pursue your objective. There's way too much going on. And actors, what I say to my actors is, there is so much that is out of your control in an audition room. So much is out of your control. How you're gonna look based on what the type, all the crap, all the stuff we have no control over. When I was going in for Wicked, I went in for Wicked 14 times over 5 years before I got the gig. Wow. The first 6 times I was a young fella, and they were calling my ass in at 10 o'clock in the morning to sing these high B's. And I couldn't do that. I mean, I couldn't do it. And that's not something I have any control over. But of all the things that you can control, memorize your stuff. That's one of the almost zero elements of success that an actor can wrap their hands around and commit themselves to doing to completion. Take a look at the script, read the script, memorize your lines, so that you're not just memorized and reciting by rote, as I remember doing in so many of my auditions. And I wish I could go back and talk to myself, or someone would have talked to me about that. Harness the material. That there's a kind of a bad land between memorization and harnessing, that you're kind of in the first day of rehearsal where you think you're memorized, and then a director throws a note at you and your lines go up. The material is not quite harnessed yet. Harness that material so you can be as flexible as possible to take notes. We've all had the experience, anyone who's listening, who's auditioned, of going into a room and we kind of know the material, but we maybe kind of don't. And then we get a note we get an adjustment from someone. You're up the creek. You can't, there's no way to do it successfully. You can pretend, but the people who are watching you are probably experienced and smart. You're not fooling anybody. So the question was about Joe and what he expects. What Joe expects is what I expect, is what people unilaterally at the highest level, which I know all of you want to work at. There is just no room for unpreparedness. Please be gracious and kind to people. You have no idea what a difference it makes. It makes a really big difference. I do, however, want to make sure everyone understands there's a bit of a myth that if you do one thing wrong, or if you turn a job down, that you think you're going to disappoint someone, that they're going to talk about you, and that your reputation is going to take a hit. The people I know, who are the people that work at a high level, take really seriously giving negative feedback about another artist to a colleague. And it's reserved for a situation where that person is so unpleasant to work with that they really want to save their colleague from a potentially unpleasant experience. But please don't worry about your reputation getting destroyed if you make a mistake. People in this business have very short memories unless you do something really, really offensive. But be prepared. be nice. When you walk into the audition room, do not look to be reassured. Please look to reassure the people behind the table. That makes a huge difference. The room is yours. Reassure them. They want the session to be over. They want you to get the job. You know, you've heard that before. But you know, there are no tips and tricks. I'm really strongly against tips and tricks classes. Some of these on-camera classes in New York that prep you for pilot season. Just learn how to act. Find an acting teacher who you trust and work your tail off. Work your tail off. Find a group of people, you know, instead, for instance, of like sitting around a coffee table getting drunk reading a play. See what happens if you make the decision to say, you know what, guys, we're going to not drink this time. We're going to drink out. We can get drunk after. But let's sit up straight. Let's put our little sport jacket on here in quarantine. And let's read the play and let's have a discussion about the play. To just take things up a little bit in professionalism, because there's a real dearth of it. And there always has been, and there will be for all time. The people who are super prepared, super dedicated to what they do are rare, and they stick out. So that's the answer. If you want to put yourself in position yourself to be successful in the best way possible, it just comes down to working harder than the person next to you, and being kinder than the person next to you, and being patient, because there were times when I've been in a casting room where the more talented person, such as they were, did not get the job, because that's just the way it panned out for a number of reasons. You know, Once on This Island was a really interesting situation, because you had the dance team who wanted dance. Camille Brown was the choreographer. She's a company dance guru. She wanted dancers. The vocal orchestrator wanted singers. Michael Arden wanted actors, you know, and so there's a real negotiation that has to take place about who's going to get the gig. And so some phenomenal dancers didn't get the gig because their voice, but that's just going to happen. That's going to happen. But just work really hard and be really good to people. There's really nothing besides that.
Thank you. That's really great. I want to come back to Camille Brown for a second, because I'm a big fan of her work.
Amazing.
But before we go on to Once on This Island, which by the way is one of my favorite shows in the world. I saw the original. I didn't see the revival. I'm so sorry. I was here.
Yeah.
But I wanted to back up and say, talk about the Wicked audition room again, and on both sides of that, or really any, like, what kind of audition material works best in an audition room? Maybe just for Wicked, or even generally, like, what works well?
Practically, if you're going in for Wicked, you're doing material from Wicked, right? I mean, a lot of the time,
for an open call, I'm saying.
For an open call, when I'll do a vocal performance seminar every now and then at my studio. Sing songs that you really love, and it sounds like cliche, like in one ear and out the other, but it really isn't. So think about what that means. A lot of people, most people, have their books crammed with songs that they have been told are good for them, or they have been assigned by a teacher who thinks that you would book with this song. Meanwhile, they don't particularly like the song, but they sing it. I had someone sing, what's that song? I'll be wearing ribbons down my back this summer. What's that from?
It's from Hello Dolly.
Yeah, Hello Dolly.
Ribbons Down My Back, yeah.
Ribbons Down My Back, yeah. And she was singing Ribbons Down My Back, and it's okay. It's an okay song. And I could see she was sort of like, she was giving me dead eyes. And I said, do you like this song? And she looked at me and she said, no, I don't. And I said, then don't sing this song anymore. And she said, okay, thank you. But she was about to take it into an audition later that day. So go through your book. It doesn't matter what the song is, truly. I mean, you go to a rep coach or go to a vocal coach, and of course it matters. I mean, you got to sound good on it. It has to be for your voice and everything. But there's a lot of songs for every voice. make sure it's a song that you would sing in the shower. Make sure it's a song that you really, really like to sing, especially if it's for an open call, because we're seeing 300 people that day. And we're going to remember the person who's just got a little bit of sparkle behind their eyes. And that's not, it sounds mystical, but it's not mystical. Are you doing something that you actually enjoy? Or are you doing something that you feel like you should be doing, or doing something that you don't particularly enjoy? And just sing a song you really enjoy singing. Yeah, it's made a world of difference for people.
I think that's great. Yeah, I hear a lot of auditions too, and
Yeah.
my gosh, there's always the one song that you're like, oh, your voice teacher told you to sing this.
Yeah, you can tell. You can hear it right away. It's just a little square. They kind of leave the room. They're not quite there. Yeah, sing songs you love. And if someone's like, ooh, that's really overdone, it's not overdone by people who really, really love it. If you really, really, really love it, go sing Moving Too Fast. You know what I mean? I mean, do whatever do what you got to do. And if you really love it, nobody's complaining, truly.
That's true. I love that advice. That's great. So I want to circle back to Once on This Island because
Okay.
I love the show, and I love what was done in the process of the revival, particularly the way that dance/movement was incorporated into the piece. Can you talk us through the process that Camille Brown brought? You know, how integral to the beginning of this was she, and what was her process like? What was she looking for in her actors? How did she create this?
She's a real visionary, Camille. So she works in a flow, she gets to a flow, kind of a flow state. And she does pre-production. She'll do pre-pro with her dancers. But when she gets into the room, she has an associate who Once on This Island was Ricky Tripp, who's a great dancer in his own right. He was in Hamilton for a long time. And she sets a really grounded, really professional, dead serious, let's go to work tone that simultaneously generates a feeling of freedom and trust in those around her. She's one of those people with an aura that makes people trust her and people would lay down in traffic for Camille because of who she is and her generosity of spirit. So her process really, I mean, I'm not a dancer, so the dancers and she spent their time in, Studio B doing what they were doing. And I was with Michael directing the scenes in Studio A, or whatever it was called. But at the top of every rehearsal, Camille would start a clap circle that was always West Indian inflected, Haitian inflected. And what she brought to the process was a historical context and a depth of regard and respect for what it means to be Black in America and for what it meant to be living in Haiti at that time in a segregated country. And she was able to infuse the process with a social foundation that would have been impossible if she were not there. And she did it in a way that made everybody want to go and pick up a book on West Indian history or on African American experience in America or in Haiti. She just made you want to. It's like what Shakespeare does. If there's something about I love Shakespeare. I'm teaching a Shakespeare class right after this. And Shakespeare, if there's a line I don't understand, it doesn't make me feel stupid. It makes me want to be smarter. She makes you want to be smarter. She makes you want to work harder. She's an incredibly hardworking woman, dedicates her whole life to her company and to her community. So that is a rare presence in a Broadway rehearsal room.
Right. Were Steve Larity and Lynn Ahrens involved in the production, or did they sort of give you guys leeway to do with it what you wanted, or
Oh,
both?
yes, no, they were involved.
Okay.
Yeah, they were involved. They were there every day they had a table. They were with the musicians at the musicians table. There were music meetings that we were in with them at the end of every rehearsal. Steve would be giving just really, really, really specific, precise. It's like how I've heard Paul Simon is in the recording studio, just super precision oriented. Ray Charles was supposed to be like that. Steve is like that, super, super, super precision oriented. So he'd be poring over the score, looking for this eighth note that he thought was pushed a little bit in one, and that's what the meetings were like. So they remained really, really dedicated to making sure that this production was a reflection of the story that they wanted to tell. And they know, because of Michael's vision for the production, which they loved, that there were a lot of variables that were coming in and a lot of changes that were being made. And they were there to kind of make sure that to give permission for it to evolve, but to make sure that as it was evolving, the heart of the story remained unadulterated, which it did. It was very successful, and Michael did a beautiful job at that. But they were great, and they're both, for the record, the sweetest people in the world.
Yeah, they are.
Nicest people in the world. Yeah. Lynn is just the best. They're just the best.
I had the opportunity with working with them in New York, and it's very true.
Oh, they're just great. So encouraging. They're just great, great, great people. Yeah.
So you've had a lot of success in the commercial Broadway world, with Once on this Island and Wicked and all these different things, but you've also had a lot of success in the non-commercial environment.
Yeah.
What's the difference, and is it important for artists to have a balance there?
Yeah, this is why I founded the Actors Gym, my acting studio, is to give people a non-commercial space to develop. So an actor could really leave their job. There's something that they leave their job-seeking cares at the door and give themselves the time to work on material that really is able to ignite them as artists. Because a lot of the time, if you're not in an acting class, even if you are in a lot of the acting classes in New York, which are hyper commercial, there's someone like me will come in there, some associate director for some Broadway show, who, by the way, has no power to do anything for any of these people with that show. It's true. It's really, sometimes I've wanted to say, like, it feels like you guys are auditioning for me right now. I hope. I can't that's not my job, and I don't know if they've been. So anyway, I really am very circumspect about those types of classes, networking type classes. And apart from those, often actors they do all their acting in audition situations where they're worried about getting a gig. And actors are the only artists on the planet who have to do their art while in front of a judiciary panel. No other artist has to do that. Imagine going into a painter's studio and sitting at a table and giving the painter notes on their brushstrokes while they were trying to paint a picture. They would tell you to get the hell out. So actors are in a very vulnerable and difficult and unique position when it comes to their commercial effort to get a gig. And so I believe strongly in creating a space where actors are given the opportunity to turn that internal clock, that stopwatch that's in the back of every freelance actor's head. I'm either aging out of my type, or I don't have time to there's this thing that's goading actors on all the time because of the nature of the pressures of what actors have to do. And I really believe it's imperative to compartmentalize commercial pursuit and commercial ambition with creative development. Those are two completely separate things. And too often are they combined in a sort of Frankensteinian workshop situation where we're pursuing professional ambition under the guise of creative development, but it's not really, because everyone only has about 4 minutes to work so they can get in front of this person. That's not creative development. That's that's like, what do you call it when you date around a table? Speed dating.
Speed dating.
That's speed dating. What I found is that if you give actors a chance to adjust their perspective into a longer game development, they get more jobs because they go into the room with the positive reinforcement of being an artist. Actors, I've called actors artists sometimes, and the look on their face, they haven't been called an artist in 10 years. You forget that what we're looking for behind the table is the most compelling artist, not the most charming auditioner. Workshops, for instance, I would never hold a workshop that's a mock audition workshop of any kind, because what they do is they simulate an environment of fear. So I know you, right? I'm going to sit behind a table, pretend I don't know you, take your headshot, be kind of like recreationally cruel to you as an exercise. And then we're going to talk about how that went. How did it go? You were a dick to me for 5 minutes. That's not helpful. So why rehearse being afraid? We know how to be afraid. For artists, we know how to be afraid. We got that taken care of. Why don't we rehearse feeling confident so that when we do find ourselves in a frightening situation, like a 10 a.m. audition for a Fierro understudy or something like that, we have the feedback, not of a scary mock audition from yesterday, but we have the feedback of a class where we knocked it out of the park, and we had some coach or some studio director say, you know what, man, that was the best work you've done in 6 months. It was really, really good. That's going to help you hit that high B a lot better than handing someone who I've known for 6 months my headshot as if I don't know them. So super committed to isolating the developmental space from any sort of commercial ambition or any worry of commercial value. I assign across ethnic lines. I assign across gender lines. I had a 36-year-old white guy doing a speech from Esther from Gem of the Ocean by August Wilson. And it's controversial, and it strikes up sometimes conversations about, is this right? Do we have a right to, is this appropriating August Wilson's work? I have my own opinion about it, but the fact that it generates a conversation where we're leaning into, I don't know, the ethics or morality structure of a developmental studio space is fantastic. It's fantastic. And August Wilson is my favorite American playwright by about 20 miles. Just a Shakespearean, the only Shakespearean American I think that we've had. In my opinion, he's just a genius. And I've given, white actresses Rose's speech from Fences, and they've learned, I can't keep that material from this actor because she doesn't share the color of Rose's skin. Rose, by the way, is fictional. You learn so much, you develop so much, and to have a space where that's okay, where we're not worried about, am I taking a job from an actress of color? No, of course you're not taking a job from an actress of color. It's a studio, it's an acting studio. And to have a space where you really can just devote yourself to working on great material, any kind of material that will enhance you as an artist and as a human being is really, really important. And if we're in a kind of, if we're in a space that's sort of commingling the commercial with the purely creative, actors, because the pressure is so crushing to succeed commercially, you cannot ask actors to put their attention on purely developing as artists if there is a potential for commercial advancement in the room. It's not fair to them. It's not realistic. So that's what I think about that.
That's amazing. I want to go a little further in that, and you're, I'm sure, very aware of the proliferation of musical theater programs, BFA programs that study musical theater across the country, certainly in the last 20 years. So two parts to this question. What do you think they do really well? And what do you think they can do better? Just in a general sense.
Yeah, generally I can address Cap 21 when I was there. What I've heard. I'll address what I've heard, but it is a generalization. What they do really well is create capable of consistent work, capable ensemble performers. They get people in dance class a lot. These programs are good. They're good at creating a performer who has a chance of booking a gig. I kind of think that's as far as I could go with what they do well. I'm not really sure. Cap 21 did very little well. I mean, it was not a great program. Crushing to actors' self-confidence. I'll tell you what the main issue is. A lot of these musical theater programs are taught by people who are threatened by actors, and it causes them to say things or behave in ways that are damaging to actors. And the stories I've heard of actors coming out of musical theater programs are like harrowing, the things that have been said to them, just the most discouraging, awful things. I was teaching an on-camera class yesterday with some people in my studio, and this actress who I've worked with for 2 years, she's very beautiful, she's very talented, you know, you would never think she would hear anything like this. She said, when I was in college in my musical theater program, I wanted to take an on-camera class, and the head of the department just pulled me aside and said flat out, you're not nearly pretty enough to be on camera, so it's just not something you should do. And, you know, that's one man at one program, so I can't generalize, but I've heard of some pretty bad stuff, pretty irresponsible stuff that's been said to performers at musical theater programs. And if we're talking about BFA, these kids are 18. Get off, back off, you know, 18 years old. You're wrangling a bunch of 18-year-old theater people into a room in New York City, and what do you think is going to happen? They're all going to be insane. Of course they're going to be insane. I was insane. You're going to act insane. So, you know, you don't ever make an actor feel like they're too much. You don't ever tell, this is a big one, to tell an actor that you're pushing. Stop pushing. Ugh, terrible note. Makes an actor feel like, oh God, I've humiliated myself. I say in my class all the time, push. What's the worst that can happen? All we're doing is mapping out the terrain here of what you have available to you. Push. This notion that if you push, someone's going to slap you on the back and you'll never be able to stop pushing for the rest of your life. Push. Let's see what you got for one day, and then we can play. We can find a middle ground. So this is from Joe. Speaking of Joe, he would say in rehearsal, and he took accountability for it when the first time I heard him say it. He said, "I think we've skipped a few steps here. I think we've skipped some steps." And we went right back to the table. I think we were staging a little too early, or we weren't quite ready for what had happened in rehearsal. And he's a brilliant at any great director, and he was particularly brilliant at pacing out the rehearsal process and having faith that, yeah, we got 2 weeks left and we haven't started staging yet, and that's okay. We're going to be okay. We're not ready yet. And to not, speaking of musical theater programs, these actors, when they come for a BFA, man, it's a shot in the dark. They might be theater kids. They might be like me, who's been doing theater for 2, 3, 4 years. I don't know. But they don't know who they are yet as people. And they're so impressionable and so vulnerable to criticism. And the answer to the question, I guess, is that musical theater programs could do to be a whole lot kinder and a whole lot more empathic to kids who, speaking from experience, do not think they're kids. They think they're all grown up and they're very capable, and they should feel that way. They should be encouraged to be confident and feel capable. But you and I know that they're children. These are children we're dealing with, and there's a responsibility to not perpetuate this myth that if you're going to make it in the big bad business, you better be tough. That's bullshit. That is bullshit. The people in this business, I know you know, are kind. There are a couple people who you don't want to be around, but they're good people. They're good people for the most part. They're professional. They don't mess around at work, you know, but you know, if you step on toes or you do something that's unprofessional, you're going to get your hat handed to you. But other than that, to my transition from acting to directing, guess what? I emailed Harvey. I said, hey man, can I get your coffee on something? I don't know. I just want to start being on the other side of the table. 2 weeks later, I was sitting next to him in Telsey at the first reading of Casa Valentina with Brian Dennehy and Amy Ryan and Bob Balaban. And there I was. And he said, sure, people say yes. People say yes. So I think a lot of musical theater programs engineer a climate of just treachery and competitiveness that is not serving anybody. That's not serving anybody. That's not the way that things go. You have to be, well, I don't know if you have to be. It seems that you would have to be somewhat competitive. There's got to be a competitive nature. If you're an auditioning actor, you've got to want to get something that someone else wants. So I guess that's the definition of competition. But this bloodthirsty thing that I think pervades a lot of BFA musical theater programs is a shame. And it frightens actors to hell. It scared me to hell. And I left CAP after 2.5 years to study Shakespeare at the classical studio there. So
I'm so encouraged and gratified to hear you say that. It gets to the core of like really my meaning in life. I train teachers. So at the MFA Musical Theatre Program, my students are coming to get their MFA. It's a terminal degree, and they're going to be out there. They're teaching and heading these BFA programs. I went to a very competitive program myself. I went to CCM, and the psychological damage from the time there is palpable. It's palpable to the graduates there, and I'm always reminded of that movie Whiplash, you know, and I think that what people have to understand, that people are successful despite the psychological damage, not because of it.
No, and that these teachers, you know, there was a great teacher who I won't name. I actually never took his class, but he was a very famous teacher who's just stopped teaching recently in New York, who had a reputation for kind of abusing his students and like getting them to cry, making them cry. I don't know, all that crap.
Sure.
Just awful. That's awful. That's a tremendous failure of ingenuity on the part of the teacher and creativity. There's a million ways to elicit clarity and beauty and good art from a human being. Never, ever, ever should someone have to revert to putting someone under psychological strain in order to achieve creativity. That's anathema to creativity. And so I'm glad that I didn't know quite what that these were teachers, future teachers at these BFA programs and heads. You know, it's from speaking from the experience you just spoke from and from my experience, man, treat these kids, the kid that's doesn't quite fit in, keep an eye on that kid. He's going to be the first one playing a principal role in New York. He's going to be the first one playing, or she's going to be the first one playing a principal role in New York. And the failing of a lot of BFA programs that I've heard is that those people are cast aside way too early as misfits because they don't look pretty and they can't kick their face and they can't do all that silly happy horse crap that is valued there, you know. So you're going to get all comers in these BFA programs and cherish these people and value these people. If there's someone who and there's going to be people who you really don't think should be in a BFA program, let them figure that out for themselves. You don't ever, ever, ever tell someone that this isn't for you. I don't think this is going to be for you. Even if it's true, especially if it's true, it's your opinion, so it's subjective, number one. Number two, you're going to traumatize that person forever. And number three, they're probably going to stay in the business anyway because it's what they love to do. So just encourage people, find teachers who are interested in, you know, I have my particular preference when it comes to acting training. The heads of each program can decide upon that. But surround yourself, this is Joe too, surround yourself with really smart, kind, empathic people who are super, super good at what they do and super loyal. Because, you know, I don't know if it's a 20th century to 21st century thing. I'm not quite sure, but the ethos right now, we all have to be very intentional about what we're putting out into the world. There's a lot of casual antagonism on stage. Antagonism is confused for acting all the time. You see people on stage just being shitty to each other and giving each other attitude. Sarcasm in playwriting is pervasive. And there's really, really no room for it. And it's not the way the business is run. It's the way that people who are teaching at BFA programs are telling kids the business is run. And I'm not sure why they're doing that. But maybe, I don't know why they're doing that, but it's not true. The business is full of kind people who are more than happy. If you have put yourself out and worked hard for them, will put themselves out for you. Full of people.
It was the most shocking thing that I learned as a young professional, was that people were respectful and kind.
Oh my God.
I was shocked. Like, no one prepared me for that.
No, no, no.
So,
you're prepared to walk into this like jungle. It's like, no. I mean, it's a little spooky. You know, you're waiting online to audition. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to do, but no. What I say to my professionals at the studio is, we all have agency to choose who we spend our time with. I was going through something last year where I had been developing a script with a colleague for 5 years or so. I was developing the script, and he was kind of a difficult guy, and we'd been friends for 10 years or so, but we were not enhancing each other anymore. The relationship had kind of run out. And there was a flare up at one point, and I just wrote him an email. And I said, I have a choice, not to him, but I said to myself, I have a choice here. I can say, go yourself. Or I wrote an email and I said, hey man, this has been the most beautiful experience. I'm gonna give you this script. We co-wrote it, I wrote half the script. I'm gonna give you the script. I don't want any credit for it. It's as a gift for, he introduced me to my partner, Allie. They were working together in Spring Awakening. And I just let him go. You just let him go. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can choose. In my head, I was like, oh, I really should stick with this because maybe there'll be an opening somewhere and then I'll miss, but that's just silly. No, if there's someone who is not enhancing you and making you feel good, and I don't mean happy for a day, I mean like a good person, like appreciated, seen. If you don't feel seen by somebody, or there's something about you that you know is valuable that someone's missing, you don't have to spend time with that person. I don't care if that person is a Joe Mantello or a Harvey Fierstein or anybody. There is no one more important than you knowing that you're valued as a person. So if you get into the business and you're working with someone who is kind of like a jerk, but you're like, oh, this is just what it is, it's not. It's not. That doesn't mean quit every job where someone's rude, but it does mean you can choose. You can choose to surround yourself with people who are positive people and who enhance you and who you know you're enhancing. And the community that I've built at the studio and with my company is built upon that entirely. It's, if you show up wondering what you can receive from this company, you're not going to receive anything. But my philosophy is, and it's like, it seems like simple math. I know nothing about math, but if you have a group of people sitting in a circle, all of whom have come to give to the group, everyone in the group will receive from everyone else in the group. So the only way to ensure that you're going to get something from a group is to show up ready to give of yourself, and to know that it's a group that shares that philosophy, and everyone will reap huge rewards. So if there's someone in your circle who's not on board with that sense of community and that sense of generosity, just keep an eye on that, because that's the outlier.
I think that's fantastic words of advice. I so appreciate you being here and sharing with us this. It really is amazing, and it's something that everyone needs to hear. So we're gonna turn to the Pivot questionnaire now.
Cool.
These 10 questions originally come from a French series, Le Bouillon du Couture, by Bernard Pivot, but they're better known as the questions that James Lipton asked every guest at the end of his Inside the Actors Studio television show. There are 10 questions, and the first question is, what is your favorite word?
This is the only one I had trouble with. What's my favorite word? My favorite word, it's sort of like yes, but it's a willingness to, whatever word corresponds to a willingness to jump off a cliff with me. Loyalty or something. Yes, yes.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
What is your least favorite word?
Inappropriate.
Oh.
I
We've heard that.
hate that word.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
A willingness to move forward into a deeply uncertain situation. I enjoy it. And it turns me on to be around people who are like, yeah, okay. So moving into uncertainty turns me on.
What turns you off?
When people take selfies, but don't look at the lens, they look at themselves on the screen. I don't, do not do that. It's beyond me. I don't know how, but they're giving a selfie face.
Yeah.
As if they're looking, but that they're looking at themselves making the face, it turns me off. That turns me off.
I love that. That is
Yeah.
a peeve. What is your favorite curse word?
Cunt.
You're our first one to choose that particular word. I like it.
Very specific, and it's kind
It
of
is.
British, and I like the way the Brits use it. Fuck is the most utilitarian.
Sure.
But yeah, that's my choice.
What sound or noise do you love?
I like the sound of big cats purring, like a lion or a tiger or a puma.
Do you watch the television show?
No, I don't watch Tiger King, but there is a YouTube channel called, I think it's like I Am Puma or something. Anyway, it's amazing. This guy has a pet puma, like the size of a huge Great Dane, and he's just cuddling with this. I like big cats.
All right. What sound or noise do you hate?
Shushing backstage.
Yes.
And by the way, guys, there is no louder noise backstage than shh. So you're being 10 times louder than whoever you're trying to get to be quiet. Shushing backstage makes my hair stand on end. Hate it.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I was gonna say a trial lawyer because I feel I think I like arguing. Basically, as a director, I study arguments. You know, you look at plays and you study arguments. But a trial lawyer, or is there an occupation still, or was a rhetoric professional, rhetorician? Is there a rhetoric person? I mean, a linguist. I love language. Maybe a linguist or something about language, rhetoric and language.
Right. Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
What profession would you not like to do?
A TV, like a Ryan Seacrest, a TV
really?
personality. I can't. I just can't. I just can't. I don't know how they do it. It's just so. It's so Mario Lopez. Like, how does he do that? How is he still doing that? That seems so hard. Or Jimmy Fallon. Poor Jimmy. We all feel bad for Jimmy. Or a kindergarten teacher, because I don't know how they do it. I have so much respect for it, but wow.
It's true.
No idea how they do it. Yeah.
And then try it on Zoom.
Yeah. I mean, I can't. Yeah. Kindergarten teacher. Yeah. Something like that.
So the 10th and final question is, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I think it would be nice if he were to say, your family is right over there.
Ah, that's very sweet.
Isn't that nice?
Oh yeah, I think it'd be nice.
That would be nice. You wouldn't have to like look around.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Perlows. Yeah, okay. Perlows. Yeah, they're right over there. They're over there.
So we're going to turn to some questions from our audience here. And this first question is from Bryn. She is interested if the Actors Gym are doing any remote classes during quarantine.
I'm doing one at 6 o'clock. Yeah, we're doing. Yes, in May, I'm offering 3 stage to camera classes a week that I call Closing the Gap, because I have a whole philosophy, or the idea of acting on camera has been taught as if it's this really mystical, different, tricky thing from just acting. And there are technical adjustments you have to make based on the proximity of the audience and stuff like that. But much, much closer than I think is taught generally. So I'm teaching that class, and on Wednesdays and Saturday nights, I'm teaching a rehearsing Shakespeare class. We're doing Richard III for 3 weeks. And I'm going to figure out if I'm gonna do this in May, and I'm gonna see how, this is all new on Zoom. So I'm gonna see how it goes, and if it continues to, if it goes well, then I'll continue it maybe in June or July, however long this happens. But yes is the answer, and you can go to theactorsgym.com, and that will have all of the classes that are happening.
Fantastic. That's great. Here's another question. This is from Daniela. She asks, how did you discover directing, and how did you learn this craft? What did you always want to be a director, or was it somewhere like on your 999th performance of Fierro, you were like, I'm done, I need to get out of here?
I guess it's time to be a director or anything else. No, you know what the answer, it's a good question. I had to think for a second. I discovered directing working with my college, my last college teacher, my acting teacher, whose name is Louis Sheeter. He was the head of the classical studio, the Shakespeare studio at Tisch, for a long, founder of it and head of it for 20, however many years. And he was such a brilliant, brilliant teacher. Whip smart, genius, encyclopedic knowledge of Shakespeare, which was where I learned, like, oh, there's no trick to it. You either know the stuff or you don't know the stuff. And it taught me that as a director, you have got to know that script, man. If an actor, my worst nightmare as a director, if I go into rehearsal and an actor knows more than I do about the script, or I say something about the script and an actor goes, oh, actually, I don't think that's true, and I'm wrong. It's like, oh man. So I learned about directing before I even started acting professionally, and he just was so powerful, an influence for me, that I never stopped thinking about acting technique. That's kind of what I thought about that brought me into directing. I'm just fascinated by actors and acting technique, and really fascinated by the way acting has been taught in this country for the past 75 years or so, and how that's caused a lot of problems for actors. So I'm trying to push the needle on that a little bit. But Louis is how I came to directing.
That's amazing. All right, we've got one more question here. This is from Free Bicknell. And Free writes, hi, David. What is the best advice you could give to yourself if you could go back in time to your early days? Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Interesting question. I'm picking an age. You know, the best advice I could give myself, I don't really, if I did anything differently, I wouldn't be who I am now. It's that thing. Sure. So I kind of had a good time. I made a lot of mistakes. I got in a couple bar fights. I got in a couple messes in a couple relationships, but nothing. I think, you know, it's okay. I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, I would say, like, maybe don't have that last drink or something like that. But in terms of professional, you know, auditioning or anything, I really walked to the beat of my own drummer, and those choices, you know, early on, I was really into like jeans and white t-shirts when I was auditioning. And people would constantly be telling me, like, David, white is not really great when you audition. You should really wear a color. And I just didn't have any idea what they were talking about. It just made no difference. But it's just not what I wanted to wear, you know? So my advice to my younger self would be, you're doing great. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a good job.
Well, thank you very much, David. Virtual applause for David Perlow today. Virtual applause.
Yes, thank you.
This marks the final episode of the SDSU Studio Series. From all of us at the San Diego State MFA Musical Theatre Program, we thank you for joining us here for these digital conversations with Broadway professionals. I'd like to thank my colleague, Stephen Brodebeck, and the SDSU archive assistants, Eden Hildebrand and Devin Hunt, for their participation. And even though they're not here listening, I wanted to give my heartfelt thanks to all of our guests who have appeared on our screens. All of our episodes have been recorded, and can be found in the archives section of our website, SDSU Studio Series.wordpress.com. Thank you all, and thank you all for coming, and thank you, David.
Thank you, Robert. Such a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.